Alright, we are recording for chapter 12 of The Final Frontier. We'll see how this goes. I'm rather tired, but there's plenty of stuff to talk about in this chapter. It starts off with Spock reflecting on his time with Sybok when a child. He had been not quite 13 in Earth terms when Sybok came to live with the family. Sybok was a total stranger, and young Spock, though he tried not to admit it, even to himself, was terrified of that first meeting. For Sybok was a full Vulcan, the son that Sarek had always really wanted to have. After all, young Spock reasoned Sybok was also an adept in the ways of Kolinar, though not in good faith, but anyway. The total transcendence of emotion, also not what Kolinar is. And here was Spock, half human, always struggling to master his feelings, already made keenly aware by his peers of his inferior heredity. The bullying by other Vulcans when he was growing up has been stated in other points, in the other books. And it's like, yeah, kids are gonna do that because kids can be assholes. It's kind of part of growing up. Just do what you can, parents, to try to maintain disciplines so they do grow out of it. But that would also demonstrate that the other Vulcans are also kind of emotional as well, because it is illogical to be like that. It's also, Kolinar is not about transcending emotion. It's about purging them, getting rid of them entirely. That's not transcending, that's not surpassing, going through emotion. That is removing them. That's a completely different concept. Just transcending emotion would in fact be what Sybok wants. And so the fact that there's entire practices, entire ritual to that, does mean that Sybok is wrong in his efforts, because he's like, well, that people aren't doing this and they should. It's like, well, no, if it is transcendent, then that's exactly what you're saying they should be. But in any case, this suggestion here for Sybok was a full Vulcan, the son that Sarek had always really wanted to have. I have major issues with that. It does set up that, yes, Spock's secret pain is that he is not, that he is half human. It does set that up. Okay, fine. Problem is that in Search for Spock, Sarek specifically said to Kirk that whatever issues were between he and Spock, they'd been resolved long ago. So Spock should not have that issue then. Should not have that secret pain. There's also the element of Spock. If you are not the child Sarek wanted to have, he would not have married your mother and had you. Sarek would only have married Amanda knowing that, what kind of children they would have together. He's not stupid. He understands how biology works. And it would be illogical for him to take a mate that he has no interest in reproducing with. Because it's kind of what taking a mate is about. You are who he wanted, Spock. As a child, you might not get that. Understood. You're an adult now, you should understand it. So it shouldn't be a secret pain. So yes, I have issues with that. I'm just checking notes here. This that I hate, but I can give it a little bit of a pass because the book is older when people were possibly more stupid on this. This is Kirk speaking to Spock. I realize you find violence distasteful, but you could have shot him in the leg and stopped him that way. Spock points out, no, Sybok is so driven that the only way to stop him is to kill him. But it's also just the whole shoot him in the leg. That doesn't work. It is routinely pointed out by people when someone tries to claim that that's a good way to ensure you get killed, because a leg shot doesn't actually stop somebody. That's why, center of mass, you aim there, you're most likely to stop the person. Okay? Shooting in the leg, no, they could actually keep coming at you, because if nothing else, the momentum is still being carried up here towards you, not with the leg. But there's also, you hit the femoral artery, and we'll just assume that Vulcans have that as well. that person's dying. Okay, I mean, say it is very difficult. It would be very difficult to treat that. I mean, bones is right there, but not a surgical crew. So maybe they could do something, but it's no guarantee. Like, you would have to immediately plug that. And there's also, I'll just add this as well. I just realized that. Oh, how did that even happen? Sorry, just the next highlight here is weird. Is not quite properly formed. What the heck are you doing? I hate. Trying to do a highlight across pages on the Kobo is very difficult to get right. But fine, we're just going to do it that way. Technically, it has an extra word in there, but anyhow. But one thing that I want to add, there is, because there's also the concept of, shooting yourself in the foot. Never do that. And I would even say don't repeat that as a cliche in a book, because there is so much vasculature in at least the human foot that is actually also a way to kill you. It is possible that you will bleed to death because of that wound. And it's also, even if you survive, the damage to your foot might still be severe enough that you're not going to be walking again. Not easily. So yeah, it is. Yeah, just no, don't do that. Don't do that. And it's also reminds me, I've heard about a torture that they do. I think it actually might still be practiced in some spots. That it's called feathering, and it does kind of relate to the vasculature stuff, where they take a stick. This will work for now. Imagine this is the foot, and they just strap you down like a torsion bed, tension bed, traction bed, like that, and have your feet there, and a guy just takes a stick, here's your feet, and just goes like that, and keeps going for hours and hours and hours of constantly just rhythmic. And it's a light stick. I mean, it would be heavier than this thing and larger, but it's still a light stick. So on its own, it's not going to hurt the foot. If it would just, wouldn't be a problem. I mean, it would hurt, but it's not going to do damage. But by continuing to do that over hours, it actually does such damage to the foot. They can leave the person unable to walk, and I think even in some cases they have to amputate the foot. That's how bad it is. And that, I do believe, does relate to the vasculature, because that could be what is being damaged there. So yeah, there's a lot of places that you might think, oh, that should be mine. That if you hit somebody there, that should be a minor wound. It's like, no, nope. There's. It is very correct and appropriate. The statement concerning guns. Aim it only at something you intend to destroy. And by the way, you do that even that is the rule, even if it's not loaded. Okay, you always treat a gun with that level of respect. But it is also where if you are aiming it at somebody, yes, center of mass is best. But technically, if you are aiming at any part of the person, you still need to have the mindset of destroying that person, not destroying the hand, destroying the arm, no, the person. You should always think of it that way. Take it that seriously, because it's very possible that a shot somewhere else, even in a limb, might still prove that destructive. Maybe not if it's like in Captain Blood, shooting off a toe. Okay, fine, but that's specifically to shoot off the toe, not just hitting someone else. But regardless, it's. I hate the cliche of shoot him in the leg. It doesn't work that way. You're still very possibly going to seriously injure the person, including fatally. And it also isn't going to stop them. There's no reason to believe that will stop them. So you're actually making the situation potentially worse. Because they're going to keep coming at you, and they might now be more angry. So, anyway. Next thing we got here. Jim spread his hands helplessly, because they're still having this back and forth. And there's more I got to complain about here. But Spock, we're talking 200 lives against 1. So he's saying that there's 200 people on the Enterprise. That if Spock had only killed Sybok, they would all be safe. In needs of the many, needs of the few kind of thing. 200? The complement of the original Enterprise, not the refit. The refit is larger, so there might be more people there. But the original complement was 400. Was around 400. I think it might have actually been more. I don't quite remember, but still around 400. This is described as a skeleton crew. Skeleton crew is 200? That's a lot. I mean, I'm sorry. That doesn't make sense to me. I don't think that's right. I would expect a skeleton crew to be in the dozens, because a skeleton crew should be the minimum necessary to operate the ship. 200, that's a lot of people. That I would think is not the full complement, of course, but that should be more than skeleton crew. And is stated later, is mentioned later, that is skeleton crew. But that's also mentioned at a moment where it's like, yeah, you got no idea what the hell you're talking about here. None of this makes sense. So we have this here for the whole, because Kirk tries arguing that, I know you don't have a brother. I know everything that's in your personnel file. Why Kirk knows all that, I'm not sure. McCoy I could see knowing it all, because he would have to know personal history and family history, all for medical purposes. But in any case, it's like, I know you don't have a brother. I do not. Technically, you are correct. I do not have a brother. Then what the hell do you mean? I have a half-brother. But in the interim, we get this. There was little point to be gained from explaining that Sybok was Kotorskan, an outcast. Considered dead by his family, his very existence had been expunged from all public records on Vulcan. That seems a bit extreme. And not very Vulcan, to erase records. But at least it does help give cover for the whole, yeah, it wouldn't appear in Starfleet record because not even the Vulcans would acknowledge him. Anyway, we next get this. McCoy interrupted. I thought your father was never married before he met your mother, Amanda, which, that's actually a little interesting. I always assumed Sarek is noticeably older than Amanda, and potentially then that Sybok's mother was a prior marriage that could have ended in with Sarek being a widower, and just once his diplomatic duties took place, he met Amanda, got married. So it's like, I'm actually not sure how close in age those two are. But in any case, thought he'd never been married before. Spock stopped him. Legally, he never was. After Teray, the priestess, his first wife, decided to devote her life to the priesthood, the marriage was annulled. Such things are permitted members of the priesthood. There had been only one mating cycle, and Sarek was led to believe that the union had borne no fruit. Had he known, Spock paused, then continued, Teray conceived a son and kept his birth a secret. It was not until she died that Sarek learned of his son, Sybok. After that time, he brought Sybok to live with him. Sybok and I were raised as brothers for a whole year. But it's still, there's so many problems here. So, why this idea that, oh, well, I'm going to dedicate myself to the priesthood, so we have to get this annulled? It's like, that would imply she's not a priestess yet. Because, like, wait, I'm sorry, but if I was Sarek in a situation like that, it's like, okay, fine, you're a priestess here, and it's like, cool, we get married and all that, and then it's like, you know what? No, I want to annul this and do this. Why are you saying that now? I'm sorry, I would be arguing, and I don't care if there's a tradition here. It's like if there was an actual Vulcan divorce court, I'd be arguing her position is not changing with the priesthood. Her position is not changing, and she's leaving. I say, no, I don't want this annulled. She needs to make a better case than that. She entered into this commitment knowingly, and now she's trying to back out of it without the situation changing. I'm sorry, that's completely inappropriate. Now, if she were an adept, okay, I could see that. But there'd still be the issue of, wait, they allow adepts to have active marriages, shall we say? I'm aware Amanda is an adept, but it is also possible that she and Sarek, due to their age, are no longer enjoying marital relations, just for that reason. Their older age, And so she is able to be an adept and is not having sex. And it's like that would make sense there. But it's like, okay, maybe adepts are allowed. And then it's well, no, she was an adept, but then she decided that she did wish to become a priestess. And so okay, that makes sense. Except here's the problem. It was earlier suggested that her communion with the ancients in the Hall of Ancient Wisdom, that it was from Teray's experience with that she learned about the whole Shakari stuff, right? But Sybok, an adept, didn't have access to the hall. He had to, overpower the guard to find out where his mother's katra was and then enter. So adepts, based on that, do not have access. So Teray did not have access until after, but she specifically mated with Sarek to have Sybok to then satisfy the visions that she was given from the communing with the Katra. So she'd have to have been a priestess, but then we go back to the problem that I had already gone off about, that it's like, so her position isn't changing, she just wants out of the marriage. And it's like, that's, even Vulcans should be like, I mean, yeah, I know there's tradition here, but still, that's not valid. That's not logical. You abuse this man. And then also the idea that it could be hidden, that the pregnancy could be hidden, makes sense. None of it makes sense. This really, really is dumb. Plus, there's the whole betrothal aspect that does exist based on Amok time for Vulcans. That they, if this was his first marriage, would have been betrothed when children. Okay? Because that's what it was for Spock. So, they were betrothed from that early on. You'd think then that you might also have it be, like if she was already entering into the priesthood, it might be hey, guess what? You have to cut off the psychic link for his Ponfar. You have to do that because you're entering into it. It is just wildly inconsistent with what has been given us in this, what has been given us in... Certainly in the original series, I'm just trying to remember, in the prior novelizations? Or movies? Not necessarily, no. But it is also going back to the whole, with Amok time, how Ponfar is depicted there. Sarek had... Well, yes, that is actually true. McCoy must be wrong. I thought your father was never married before he met your mother, Amanda. That's not possible because he had to have been betrothed just because of Ponfar and Amok time, all that. He had to have been betrothed to a Vulcan. Because there's no way Amanda, as a human, would be able to do the psychic link stuff that is part of the mating ritual of Ponfar. There's no way she'd be capable of that. So, and unless somehow Sarek's parents knew Amanda's parents, and also knew that Sarek would want a human... I mean, no. He had to have had at least a Vulcan woman as his fiancée for a while, that they were betrothed. Possibly have gone through Ponfar before that. Before Amanda. But somehow that ended. Or maybe it was like what happens in Amok time. The woman said no. He had to fight, and Sarek fought and killed somebody, and then later on met Amanda. It's like, so I guess it is then possible that McCoy is correct, that the impression was he didn't have he was married before Amanda, but still the ritual he would have had to have gone it through. It just which way did it end up? So yeah, it's there's so many problems here. There really are. It's because it is, you cannot neglect the fact Teray bred with Sarek to produce Sybok. She completely did that, okay? It is sexual abuse. That because she abused him, and it was in sexual manner. That's sexual abuse. That's what's going on there. He technically was consenting as far as just the mating itself, but she did not enter into the relationship in good faith. And she had no interest in the commitment to him, no interest in him. So you still got that going on, which means she chose to do this because of that vision. She had to have had the vision prior, and they're just... How did she get access? See, now I'm also just thinking, is it possible that when they say priestess, they are referring to all adepts are technically priests. Priests and priestesses. Maybe. But then you still have the issue of Cybok would have had access to the hall on that year, right? He would have had access, would have been able to find her Katra, do all that without any issue. Okay? What he did there could still have been the crime, but he would not have needed to break in. So, yeah, it is inconsistent with it. The book is being inconsistent with itself. Got a couple highlights here. So we get a bit of a flashback with Spock. It is because of Cybok that Spock entered Starfleet. That's a hell of a statement. Goes on, and then we get other stuff. It's that single line that's highlighted there, and then there's the next highlight I want to read. This is Cybok speaking. "You're going to follow in Sarek's footsteps and become a diplomat," he said. It was not quite a question. Vulcan custom dictated that Spock would do so, and besides, Sarek had always said as much. Okay. So basically, the Spock enters Starfleet because of Cybok is just because Cybok said, told him, do what you're going to do because you decide to do it, not because of expectations of other people. That's fine. It's also completely logical. There's no way that would be an issue. There isn't. Like, that is something even Sarek should have told him. Certainly Amanda would have. So, the idea that has to be Cybok is ludicrous. But then we get this, that the expectation is Spock would become a diplomat like Sarek. And that's what Sarek wanted, which it occurs to me that also nullifies the whole Cybok as the son Sarek truly wanted. It's like, no, he's not. It's like, but he wants you, Spock, to follow in his footsteps. Okay, guess what? Again, you are the son he wants. But it's also, are we saying that Vulcans are a caste-based society? I don't like this. I'm okay with them being racist. I've talked about that plenty of times. But a caste-based society is like racism inside of the race. It would be incredibly illogical as well. Because Vulcans should very much recognize everybody has their own aptitudes. And you must allow them to engage in the professional vocation that best matches their aptitudes and interests. So, it's absurd. I mean, fine, Sarek wants you to be. What father doesn't necessarily want to have a child that follows in their footsteps? Right? I mean, it's obviously they want that because, if nothing else, it is a way to connect with them. It's like, hey, now there's more I have in common with my child. It's like, yeah, every parent wants that. But that's not a Vulcan custom dictated that Spock would do so. That's not that. That's just a personal preference on the parent. And it's also, good parents should be like, yeah, I want that, but I mean, you got to do your own thing too. I mean, if that's not what you want to do, then let's find what the thing is you want to do. Let's get you there. So, I mean, it's very frustrating. Which one is this? Oh, yeah. I said it was gonna, along with the 200 is a skeleton crew. It's like, no, it's not. The skeleton crew should be smaller. But we also get this. As we cut over to Chekhov. It occurred to Chekhov that he was alone on the bridge. With the captain and Mr. Scott gone, and a skeleton crew, see, it is skeleton crew, mostly repair technicians, there's no one to relieve him of duty. It's like, but he was alone on the bridge. And how it is described later, he is. When the Cybok and company come up, it's like, who the hell leaves a single officer on the bridge Answer is no one. That's incredibly stupid. And there's also who set the ship into warp? I mean, it's like Scotty was already running down there and was at the shuttle bay, which is quite far from the ship, from the bridge. Had already gotten down there at the time that they ran in. So Scotty was not available to raise the shield. So somebody on the bridge had to have done so. And then somebody on the bridge had to, like, boom, boom, before hitting into warp. Okay? Now, potentially, yeah, Chekhov did this, but it describes Chekhov being in the center seat. He's in the captain's chair. He's not at the helm. So there needs to be at least like a lieutenant or multiple there that are on the bridge with him. And they're not the regular crew, but they would be a relief crew for taking care of this stuff. He cannot be alone. It is absurd. And you'd also think that even though he's the only command rank officer there, fine. There'd still be security because he can't leave the man alone there. What the hell? It's stupid. Because it's just obvious there's no way this would be allowed. I mean, I can understand an argument, in TNG they decided Starfleet has the rule that the captain and first officer cannot both leave the ship. There must always be one on the ship. So that's why Picard and Riker basically never beam down together. It's always typically just Riker, but sometimes Picard, and then Riker stays on board and he's in command. And I can believe that was as a criticism that people have had with the original series, that why is Kirk and Spock constantly going down from the Enterprise together? Who's left commanding the ship? It's not the first officer or the captain. That's kind of a problem. It's like, but this is just dumb. I mean, it's because this is worse. Because there's literally no one else there. No. It's what the author wanted it to be, or what Shatner wanted it to be, or one of the other people listed down there that did the story. Anyway, what the hell is this one? Oh yeah, the whole Sybok telling everyone, "Hey, we're gonna go for the Great Barrier and find Shakari." And so they start talking about what's at the center of the galactic center. What's at the center of the galaxy? What is the Great Barrier? McCoy wants to know. An accretion disk, Spock explained, bordered by an area which is densely populated by stars. Somehow McCoy doesn't understand what an accretion disk is. I get it, he's a medical doctor, but still he's a member of Starfleet. And this is like astronomy 101 kind of stuff. But then there's the question of, the dust in the ring is hot, heated by an unknown energy source in its center, which radiates an enormous amount of high-energy X-rays and gamma rays. Current research indicates that the energy source is at least 10 million times more luminous than Earth's sun. I didn't look up to check on various numbers connected here, but part of the heat of an accretion disk is also just the disk, the friction within the disk. So there are accretion disks around black holes like those at the center of galaxies. But, the black hole isn't emitting radiation. But just the tidal forces of the gravity and the fact that the accretion disk is going like that, they do glow. They will glow from that alone. From just the friction there. So you don't actually need what's at the center to be emitting anything, why they're called black holes, in order for the accretion disk to be incredibly hot. But it is also true that there's a whole bunch of stars around there. Mm-hmm. And it's actually funny because even though you might think, because of the high density of gas and dust around the core of a galaxy, you actually do see new stars being born there. They're not necessarily the most stable of stars, but they are being born there. Some of them will get shredded by the gravity. Some will survive for a while in a more or less stable orbit. But also some will get flung out from the by the gravity. It's actually kind of funny. um, just the image of something that a lot of those stars I'm pretty sure would be larger than the sun orbiting there, and they can just go get launched out at very high speeds. Anyway, so the question is, what is at the center? Well, what the heck is it? This is McCoy asking. A giant star? Spock shook his head. Unlikely. The accretion disk is rotating about the center, which means the object at the center possesses gravity. Is Spock trying to suggest... The microphone is there, remember? Is Spock trying to suggest that stars don't have gravity? At the center possesses gravity. Such enormous gravity that its mass must be roughly 2 million times greater than that of Sol, Earth's sun. Which can also just be called the sun, and you just use capital S. That's all you can... That's all you need to do that. Like, the proper name for the moon is the moon. Yes, it is also true that Titan is a moon of Saturn, just to use a random moon as an example. But Titan is lowercase m moon. Our moon is the moon. So, yeah. Anyway, it might be 2 million times. I don't remember Sagittarius A star. That is the name for the black hole at the core of the Milky Way. I don't recall if that is 2 million solar masses or not. It might be. 2 million times? That would be some star. Not quite, because you wouldn't... It would collapse. That's too much mass. But anyway, indeed, but there is not enough hot gas or dust present to account for more than a fraction of the mass. Huh? I mean, this is kind of the argument for dark matter. That we don't see it, so there must be something else there for the mass. It's like, okay, but what? I mean, what? I don't see how this argument leads to things. I mean, it's just we can't see it all. We know it's all there, though, because of the gravity, but we can't see it. Because there's a barrier. Count for more than a fraction of mass. This has led to two theories. One, that a singularity, either a neutron star, which is not a singularity, or a black hole, technically not also singularity, but I can get... Black holes, it's a little weird. I'll get to it, though. Compact, but incredibly dense and exerting incredible gravitational force, is at our galaxy's center. And the second theory, a white hole. I hate this. A creation machine, if you will. Spock paused. Of course, this is sheer speculation. I get the desire for the concept of a white hole. So the inverse of a black hole, that instead of absorbing matter, is emitting it. Problem is, there must be a source of that. And technically, and this hasn't got to do with it being a singularity or not, I'll explain why I don't necessarily like black holes being described as singularities, because technically some of the reasoning for that means a lot of things are singularities that we would not describe as that. But it's like, technically a black hole, if you follow Hawking radiation, and to a lesser degree gravitational waves, but they are also sources of mass. They do emit it, it's just very slow, unless it's very large, but it's not very quick. It is if you looked at a black hole over eons, you would actually see it releasing mass. That is how Hawking radiation is, so they are technically themselves white holes as well, it's just over a very long period of time. But yeah, so I don't like the term singularity for black holes. I am willing to forgive the use of the term quantum singularity that we do get in at least TNG. For Romulans do not use matter-antimatter reactions to power their ships. The Federation and Klingons do. Romulans instead use a quantum singularity, an artificial one. But anyway, a singularity just refers to the fact that essentially you can describe the object as though it is a single point. There is no difference for a black hole that's this large. There's no difference for if the object inside of it is this big or a single point. You can treat it all as a single point. Everything works out the same. So this is just one of those funny things that possibly, technically, a physical surface to the mass within a black hole could be directly under the surface, directly under the barrier that is the black hole, the event horizon. There we go, that's the term, which is the Schwarzschild radius. Technically, that can be true. It very possibly isn't, but it's technically possible. But no, it's a singularity in that, yes, we can describe it as a single point. We can do that with anything that has gravity, though. The sun, as far as the Earth is concerned, could be, gravitationally speaking, described as a singularity, because we're outside of it. The way gravity works, and this is actually kind of handy, is when you are outside of the object, you can treat it as though all the mass is just at the center of gravity. Okay, you can treat it as that. Which makes some of the math a hell of a lot easier. And it's also why you can then see that whether the sun is the size it is now, and we're going to say that the mass is always the same for this example. But if it's raised to double what it is now, half what it is now, doesn't matter. The gravity of it will always be the same, because it can always be treated as though it is a singularity, as far as that is concerned. There would also technically be the argument of a mathematical singularity that in diffie-q, differential equations, and it's been a while since I took that, that a singularity can have just all the vectors basically pointing towards it. But again, that's just a description of gravity. When you're far enough away from the sun, it appears to be a singularity. When you're far enough away from the Earth, it appears to be a singularity. So I don't like that term singularity for a black hole. I do understand it. I just feel black hole is a better term for it, because that does better encompass more aspects of the object. So I can't fault the story for that, no, but it is just... Well, I've given the explanation for why I think that is not the best term for describing it in a book. Oh, I also do want to mention this. 1990, I think this was? 88? Hang on. I want to check when this came out. 89. Okay. So that's important, because 89, likely written and produced in 88. Black holes were theoretical until the Hubble Space Telescope, and that launched in 1990. I don't remember when it actually made the observations that confirmed the existence of black holes, but that is actually one of the things that is specifically the Hubble Space Telescope's legacy. There's a lot of things that Hubble has for its legacy. That is one of them. So I do just want to also mention that technically the fact that this story depicts something other than a black hole at the center of the galaxy, and some people might think, oh, well, that's dumb. We all know it's what. At the time, we didn't even know for certain that black holes existed. They were still theoretical. Okay, just be clear on that. Oh, but also the idea that a neutron star, it's like neutron stars, again, a neutron star is no more a singularity than the sun is, and also that much mass it would collapse down. But I'm trying to remember, they did find, okay, so in theory, I know I'm just going off on tangents. So technically, you run the math by our current understanding of astrophysics. And at certain masses, a star should simply collapse down to being a black hole. So you could have a supermassive star, and some of these do exist, and that once the fuel runs out for nuclear fusion, so there's nothing pushing out and the gravity can collapse in, if it's below a certain threshold, it will collapse in and reignite fusion, but in such a way that causes a supernova. I'm trying to remember what... Is that a type 2 supernova? I don't remember. But in any case, it'll do that. Boom. But there's also... If it's above that threshold, it'll just collapse down and go completely to a black hole. That it'll just continue to collapse down. One problem with this, though. We have actually found a neutron star. I think it might also be a pulsar. So a pulsar is just a neutron star that's spinning, has such a powerful magnetic field and is spinning so rapidly, light is only emitting through the poles. Through the magnetic poles, at least as far as radio waves are, and it's passing across us, so that's how we've been able to detect it. But anyway, We do know of one that is above that threshold. We have no idea how, though. Because it's like, mathematically, according to our understanding of astrophysics, that thing should just collapse down to be a black hole, but somehow it's resisting. No one knows how. I'm sorry, it's just, I like things like that where it's like, we understand how it works. Here's the formula. Here's a counterexample in nature. Well, shit. We're still going to use this though because we got no better idea. That's so much of science is that. It's not funny. It's like, it's actually kind of a serious issue how much of science is legitimately, we actually don't know how this works. We just have a good approximation here, but we don't tell anyone that. It's like, that's one example. The standard model is an example. Technically, there's certain aspects of general relativity and quantum mechanics that are that because we can't explain all the phenomena. We have things that explain most, but not necessarily completely, and we still don't know how to get from quantum mechanics up to general relativity and general relativity down to quantum mechanics. We still don't know that. So at least that is something that we acknowledge that, yeah, we don't know that, but there's somewhere they don't talk about it. Another highlight here, this starship simply isn't constructed to withstand that sort of intense radiation from the Great Barrier, nor is her crew. Yep, that's fair. That's legitimate. One significant problem there is not only does the Enterprise pass through the Great Barrier with Sybok's help, which Spock says that Sybok is a trained astrophysicist. When did he achieve that while being an adept? I mean, I've said... I'm actually not sure if it was in these videos or in Voyage Home. Probably in these, though. Priests do study other things. Like, Catholic priests do study other things. Some of them do have very high degrees, in fact, in various other things. Like, the dude who came up with the Big Bang Theory was a Catholic priest and monk and an astrophysicist. So it's absolutely possible. But Sybok is just described as being an adept, that he was raised as an adept, to be an adept by the Kulinaru. And now it's like, Spock's just saying, oh yeah, he's also an astrophysicist. Where did this come from? I don't know. It's just stated. Probably because it's necessary, but it's like, well, he figures that he has found Shakari, and he's an astrophysicist, so that makes sense. It's like, astrophysics doesn't mean you know where things are in the universe. It means you can explain things in the universe. But it's like, okay, that can explain how he believes that this ship can, by one means or another, cross the Great Barrier safely. How the Klingon bird of prey follows them, though, I got no clue. Hopefully that gets explained. I will not be surprised if it does not. Which also reminds me of a thing that occurred to me yesterday because I watched Monty Python and the Holy Grail. And the thought came to me, this movie, this comedy, this satire is giving more attention to the question of whether or not a swallow could carry a coconut into England. Well, or northern France, either way. Could carry a coconut there. Then some of the stories I've read have given time to various other technical questions. It's like, because, I mean, if nothing else, at least it's well, you could have two swallows carrying. It's like, okay, that kind of makes sense, but it still is. It's meant to be a joke. It's also possible that the coconuts were just brought by a pilgrim. And the whole, well, we found them. It's like, well, the pilgrim dropped them. I mean, it's... Or just it's none of your business. We found them. Not we purchased them or anything. It's just, we found them. So it's like, that's actually not that bad. But this, it's like, Sybok happens to have all these different credentials. Even though we technically also don't know how the hell old he is. I mean, it just... So they're climbing up the turbolift shaft. But not Spock. A soft whoosh descended upon them from above. McCoy looked up, startled. Spock eased slowly down the shaft, sporting the levitation boots he used at Yosemite in the beginning of the story. How'd he get ahead of them? Like, this is something also in the movie that has bothered me. And it's bothering me here as well. That he comes down in the movies. He passed them without them knowing. Why did he pass them? Why didn't he come up level to them and then be like, "Hey, here I am"? I mean, what? It makes no sense. Plus, there's also just the issue of the turbo shaft doesn't make sense. I'm not actually sure if it could be there. I mean, it's the layout of the Enterprise. I don't think supports a single turbo shaft being as large as they seem to suggest it is. And it's also technically turbo shafts. They don't just go up and down like an elevator. They do also go side to side. And I'm not sure if you do see it in the original series, but in TNG at least, there are times that you can see, because they have the little windows and the lights going by, which is really just an effect for television to let you know they're moving. But you do see times when the lights are going like this, indicating they're moving up, but other times where they are going side to side. So yeah, that is the case, but this is only described as a vertical shaft, which technically doesn't make sense. Yeah. I mean, because it's also they were in ventilation shafts that were moving, and then somehow they gained access. I mean, just there are technical issues with this, which also now that makes me wonder. Man, I do now wonder. A story that I think might be in the commentary for Star Trek 6 that Nimoy was a producer for, an executive producer, is he once noted a typo, some sort of mistake on one of the stickers, a warning label on the ship, and he actually made them fix it before filming the scene. Like, he delayed production because, like, no, that needs to be correct. Even though this is something that chances are wouldn't be visible on the film. Like, even though, I got the 4K now, even if I knew exactly what that thing is, I still might not be able to read it with the 4K. Might not even, if they were to do an 8K or something, might not be able to read it. But it's just, he was that specific about it. Which, good for him. Thank you for that. I wonder if some of that might have been... I could believe that it's possible. Like, he's reading through this stuff and being like, this doesn't make sense. I know I'm contracted to do this, so I'm going to do it. And I don't want to tell Shatner that this is stupid. I don't want to tell Bill that... Don't want to say that to Bill. But I could believe that maybe when it got to Star Trek 6, he was like, no, we're not doing this way. It's like, like if he had here, it would have been like, yeah, we can totally use the turbo shaft, but we need to show passageways that go off horizontally through its length. We also need it to have like doors or something leading in. Instead, it just seems to be off the hallway that is the ventilation shaft that they're walking through. It's like, no, we need to do that. Maybe it would have helped. Probably, well, no, because those aren't the technical issues that exist here. It's got other issues. Okay. So, chapter 13 starts with Scotty, who did get knocked out because he's like, I know the ship like the back of my hand. Boom. Which I'm sorry, I get it, but we don't need to do that to Scotty. We don't need to embarrass him like that. I feel that's unnecessary. I get the joke, I do. But that's not Scotty. Okay? And it's like, the whole, he was distracted by his pride at knowing all this. It's like, yeah, but it's also Scotty. He probably actually does know the ship better than the back of his hand, such that he could, blindfolded, make that, turn that corner and duck instinctively, just knowing it was there. It's like, yeah. Yeah, so there's that. But we also did they got there, tried to communicate for help. No one answers except for Vixis on the Klingon first officer. And does comment about how, it's like she spoke very well without an accent. And I'm just thinking, yeah, because Klingons would know how to speak standard. Why did we start the book off suggesting that General Cord, didn't know how to speak it? These are not insignificant details. They might be considered small, but they're not insignificant. Because errors like that do speak to the author not knowing what they're talking about, and or the author not caring what they're talking about. And neither is good or healthy for a story. But I have to be fair here. There's a lot of names here, right? It's like we got Dillard, screenplay by David Lowery and William Shatner, and we have screenplay by Lowery, but story by Lowery, Shatner, and Bennett. So there's, with Dillard, 4 names there that are somehow connected to this. Maybe Dillard is a great, fantastic author and was just handicapped by these guys. That's possible. I hope that isn't true, just because that's a lousy way to have to write a book. But it's still, maybe that explains some of it. In theory, I will be finding out when I get to Star Trek VI, because Dillard also wrote that. It's my favorite movie, and I'm so concerned. Alright. Enough of my blathering. See you next time.